Yeah, I did. Once again, good evening, everyone. So glad to have you all here with us. And I don't want to take up too much of his time because what he has to say is important. As you all know, Leo has been doing this study on this book. Again, if you've not purchased it, please do so. It's an amazing book to read and take home. We have it for sale here. It's an amazing book to study and to read again and again. But Leo, I don't want to take up too much of your time, so please come and enlighten us.
Good evening, everyone. And here we are, back again with session 10, almost the end stretch right now, right? With 3 more months, counting today, or 3 more sessions. I'd like to say that tonight, if anything, and perhaps the next time we meet, it's a tough conversation, especially tonight because the topic, as we have promised in the past, after going through all the different topics that we have learned with Joanna de Angelis in terms of reaching plenitude, it's about suffering in the face of death. And it's not easy to talk about death. I will try to deliver what we gather, what we can learn from this chapter as much as I can in a pleasant way. But it's a tough talk, right? I personally have lost some loved ones this year. When we come in face of death and when we come in face of despair, illnesses and all that comes with it, it's not easy. And we ask ourselves how connected we are with the other side, right? Or we can also ask ourselves, how disconnected have we become from the other side? Our true nature. And this is what we'd like to do tonight, to reconnect, to empty our cup, as Kirsten have mentioned earlier, and fill with the true essence of why we're here and what we are aspiring to be in the future. Because the next topic is about suffering in the afterlife. And the Spiritist literature is full of examples. We will see some of them tonight. We can go and rescue these teachings so we can get connected, so we can get reacclimated again with them. But it's not easy because we are in matter. And there are certain elements that we'll see tonight as well that kind of pushes away from this idea of death, of the physical body, of dying, right? And it's natural, but it's something that we have to talk more about it in a positive way, so we don't despair, we don't create more anguish in our lives, but to see it differently. And I would like to invite everyone to participate on this as someone who will inevitably have to go through death, have to go through the decaying of the physical body, because we'll have to face it, right? As well as someone who's outside watching or trying to help someone who's going through this transition right now. Now, the positive side of this whole thing is this. We're going to go back to the other side, to our true nature, and we're going to start the whole process again, as we'll see with some of the examples. So there is hope. It's not like we're going to be doomed or to nothingness for eternity. There is a restart. So we can start counting this idea of suffering with death with a new restart, from a release of suffering as a consequence of something that we have created in the past. Okay? So hang in there. If it's too harsh, stop. Leo, let's take a break. But there's a lot to cover. That besides what Joanna de Angelis brings here, I brought some examples to really go deeper in this idea, because it's not easy. And I think we need to come to the Spiritist Center to equip ourselves with the examples, with the teachings, and really bring it to heart. So We have seen all of these chapters, as we said before, from 1 to chapter 11. Last time we were here, we studied the alternative therapies, right? We talked about this obsession therapy along with other treatments that we find in the Spiritist Center, but also the alternative therapies. Does anybody remember what we said about the goals? No. Okay. So let's just kind of go back to where we were in terms of finding a different type of therapy, right? I'll be clear in my throat quite often today, so I do apologize. To have a goal in terms of finding a therapy for ourselves, to change ourselves, right? We went through the different therapies, right? Acupuncture and different alternative therapies, along with what we also receive in the Spiritist Center and the medical assistance that we should also find. And the idea was, this is a little bit too small, sorry about that. The idea was to have SMART goals and follow these acronyms, right? The S stands for specific. Be specific on what you want. What do I want to change? What do I want to accomplish? It has to be measurable in terms of, let's say, in so many months, I want to be at this position. In so many months, I want to go back and reconnect to the self now and say, I improved this much, right? You have to be able to balance it out. Agreed upon or aggressive. We talked about being aggressive last time. This is another excerpt that I got. Achievable, acceptable, because sometimes we try to do things that is beyond ourselves, and that goes also for the R, that to be realistic, to be relevant, reasonable, to be also time-based, right? You have to be able to say, I want to accomplish this by this date, right? By this amount of time. Why we're bringing this again? Not only to reconnect to the last message, but this is exactly what we would like to think before we reincarnate. I know the idea is about death, but I want to let's go way back when, before we reincarnate. Do you think that we put a plan together before we come over here? We have studied before that we do, right? It's not that everything will happen the way we say, I'm going to this date, this is going to be. No, there are certain events. Sometimes we go this way, or we're supposed to go left, and we go right, and then we go back into the route. It's okay. But there are certain things that we connect with our mentors before reincarnate. We put that plan together, and plans are pretty much like this. If we accept that we have a mentor, somebody who is helping us, I'm quite sure that they will remember these ideas, right? Because they're not going to put a plan for us that we're not going to be able to handle it. It may be harsh, difficult, but if we accept and they see it feasible, being that there are higher minds, guess what? We're there. And we reincarnate, and here we are in the material body, full of joy, full of different choices and things that calls our attention to the wrong path. But here we are, trying our best, right? And I would like to illustrate this with the book Nosolar. In specific, chapters 8 and 48, if I'm not mistaken. Chapter 8 goes exactly through the ministries, right? There are 6 ministries. Ministry of regeneration, assistance, communication, education, elevation, and divine union, right? This is just a picture of the movie that kind of gives us an idea very well of how the ministries are separated in the divine union in the middle. But why do I bring this? Because there is a department, there is a ministry that takes care of our reincarnation. You remember in the movie as well, Laura, which is also in the book, chapter 48, reincarnating. And Lysias, the son, is kind of upset that his mother is going to reincarnate. So we also feel, right, when we are going to reincarnate, when we are coming back to the physical body. Because it's a test. It's an atonement. It's an expiation, as Yasko talked about last week. It's not easy. And if you read the book on chapter 48, you will see her concerns about her reincarnation, even though she has a lot of merit of the things that she will have to face on earth while in the physical body. She is very intelligent, well prepared, but she still knows that there are some scars that, although healed, they can come open again in contact with the flesh. So she was concerned. But we see here the preparation, right, in Nosolar of some of these spirits who discarnated. They were helped in in Nosolar, in the spiritual colony, throughout some time. They were given the opportunity to work, to regenerate themselves, and then reincarnate. Another example for us to illustrate this is right here, Missionaries of Light. And there are many other books that we can consult. We will see another case in Action and Reaction. Chapter 12 is Adelino actually also preparing to reincarnate after a situation that he had with two individuals, his mother, who is going to be now his mother, and his father in the previous life. And they go through chapter 12, and some other chapters also describe the reincarnation of certain individuals, choosing of the physical body, the composition of the physical body to attend the needs that we have to evolve. So it's important that we pay attention to these cues that are being given it to us, right? In Spiritism, we're going to get out of Spiritism a little bit soon, but here we have the proof that this is not real life. This is a temporary test that we're going through in the physical body, and everything that we see, that we touch, physically speaking, will decay, will transform. Pay attention to that. So Joanna de Angelis then comes and says, the impermanence of all things and people in the physical world is another cause of suffering. Its duration results from the intensity of the causes that have engendered it. In the case of illnesses, once the purifying trial or expiation has ended, the affected energy field is recomposed, fostering balance. However, in mental suffering, when the disharmony is emotional, individuals can use self-control, prayer, meditation, and charitable actions to easily free themselves from suffering, because they stop putting so much value on afflictions and see them instead as part of the natural process of evolution and therefore acceptable. The antidote is right here. We could stop right here and know what to do, but it's still not that easy for us, right? Because when we're going through the pain ourselves or a loved one, guess what? It's hard to even stop and connect with God. That's why we have one another. That's why we have the Spirit Center, the different churches, the different teachings that we have received in the past. Sometimes we eat, but we think we're just eating for the sake of, because it's 12 o'clock, I have to eat. No. It's because for certain number of hours, we will need energy. So why do we read about losing loved ones or receiving loved ones, dying, right? And we're not that stage of our lives yet. Guess what? Later on, we'll need. So bring that to heart. So if we are going through the disturbance of dying, of the afflictions of dying, we can stop and pray. Because once our connection is moved away from the suffering, from what we can only see with our physical eyes, and we see it something bigger, a transformation, then we don't suffer anymore. Obviously, we will cry. Obviously, we will feel, the absence of the loved one. Obviously, if we die, we will, our absence will be felt as well. At least I hope. When I die, I'll feel, oh, he went, that's okay. But we need to make sure that we are changing our mental field. And I think this also gives way to what we will talk about later on, right? Because the more emphasis we put into the physical body, guess what? The more we will suffer. The acceptance of of suffering is the decisive step for release from it, whereas rebelliousness has the exact opposite effect. I am so sorry for the font. I didn't think it was going to be this small. Once one understands that the body is a delicate organization subject to deterioration, wear, and then transformation through the phenomenon of death, one does not base the foundations of life or the essential realities on it. Thus, when disconnections and imbalances finally disrupt it for good, death does not become a reason for disgrace and ruin. Remember, this is all reason, right? And Joanna de Angelis, I was talking to Kirsten about this. She's awesome, great to bring the balance between the reason and the heart, right? Because she's not saying this in a way to us to like wake up, this is the reality, but giving us the antidotes. It's not going to be easy, but there are ways out. There are reasons we're going through this, and we'll see some of the examples. Appropriate preparation for facing death enables one to accept the fact that it is inevitable. Thus, suffering from it is mitigated. When those who put all their hopes in the material life, seeing it as having only one aim, find that it is about to end. They experience superlative mental suffering, which turns into physical suffering with no immediate relief. Thus, suffering has much to do with the psychological disposition of each individual, the way he or she looks at life and its structure, at events, and their origins. So if I were to ask you right now, what are you focusing on in your life right now? I'm not asking anybody to focus on death. I'm not asking this. But what are you focusing on? Bills? The home? In terms of home, the physical home and the physical body? How much attention do you give it to your body? Is it to the extent to take care of the body, to have a decent life, or is beyond that? Somebody who goes to the gym and is just working out because I want to have a beautiful, beautiful body. Or somebody who eats too much because it indulges in the chocolates and the different foods and all those different things, right? Or different ways. We don't have to go any far. Drinking and the other abuses of life, right? Or sometimes the person doesn't even do these things, but is very materialistic. Doesn't even think about the other side of life, the beauty of eternity, right? What are we focusing on? So I brought a couple examples because this is not new. This is something that we have seen not only in Spiritism, but in different sciences, religions, philosophy as well, as we will see here. Look what Socrates said when he was trying to, he was talking to the prosecutors of his life, talking about actually the idea or the connection that philosophers had, depending on how they connect with philosophy, in terms of death, right? He said, Never mind him. Now for you, my jury, I want to explain to you how it seems to me natural that a man who has really devoted his life to philosophy should be cheerful in the face of death and confident of finding the greatest blessing in the next world when his life is finished. I'll try to make clear to you, Simmias and Cebes, how this can be so. Ordinary people seem not to realize that those who really apply themselves in the right way to philosophy are directly and of their own accord preparing themselves for dying and death. If this is true, and they have actually been looking forward to death all their lives, it would of course be absurd to be troubled when the thing comes for which they have so long been preparing and looking forward. So this is actually a part of Phaedo, brought by Plato. And again, is Socrates connecting us with eternity. Now, we can say here for philosophers, if they truly appreciate life or dedicate themselves to philosophy, they understood what death was. They understood what the continuation of life was. But what about mathematicians? But what about religious individuals? What about anyone who applies themselves to a good cause in life? Because if I were to show this to a mathematician, they would be like, okay, it's philosophy. And tell me a little bit more. What I'm trying to say is to connect with a higher cause. To connect something with something that is beyond ourselves. I am quite sure Socrates and all the other philosophers who follow Socrates took care of the physical body. Took care of their of eating and doing the things that everyone else were doing at the time. And philosophers nowadays, they do the things that we're doing nowadays too. But if you truly apply ourselves for something higher than or bigger than we are, guess what? When the time comes, okay, I did my time, I did what I could, I apply myself to a certain level, to a certain degree that I could, and here I am, facing the transition to the other side. I also would like to bring teachings that we receive from heaven and hell. Why do we have this fear, right? Even sometimes when we connect with something greater, as Socrates did and many others, but why do we fear this? Why do we have this fear? And in the book Heaven and Hell, chapter 2, I believe is item 22, if I'm not mistaken. Fear of death. Man's real life is in the soul. But while he remains attached to external, he sees life only in the body. And therefore, when the body is deprived of life, he fancies that all is over and abandons himself to despair. If, instead of concentrating his thought on the outer garment of life, he directs his thought to the source of life, to the soul which is the real being, and which survives the change of its outer clothing, he would feel less regret at the idea of losing his body, instrument of so much annoyance and suffering. But for this man needs a moral strength which is only acquired by him gradually, and in proportion as his spirit advances towards maturity. So, just in this first part of this paragraph, we see that Kardec is telling us that when we direct our time, our attention, our energy to something bigger than ourselves, more important than ourselves, guess what? We're not going to fear death. We need to change the mentality. The fear of death, therefore, results from the sufficient knowledge of the future life, but also denotes aspiration after a continuance of existence and anxiety, lest the destruction of the body should be the end of our career. It is therefore evidently due to a secret desire for survival that is really existing in the soul, although partially hidden under the veil of uncertainty. The fear of death diminishes in proportion as we obtain a clear anticipation of the future life. It disappears entirely when that anticipation has become a certainty. So, how do we acquire this? How do we acquire the ability to remember every time we see despair in connection with death? Repetition. Number one, reincarnation. We recently came out, and I was actually debating about this with a group of people. We recently came out of the idea of being polytheistic, right? Of believing in many gods. For us to transition now into a position that we believe in reincarnation, it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of repetition in one reincarnation and the following to believe or to accept this idea that we are progressing. I'm just using the monotheistic or polytheistic ideals because for you to change something that strong, It doesn't happen in one life. So for some of us who have some doubts, for some of us who have some desire to understand more, we need to go deeper. We need to bring the reason. We need to study ourselves, analyze ourselves. Why do I feel this way? Also, we will see the reasoning of many lives in Phoebo as well by Socrates explaining or questioning the aptitudes that some individual had without having any connection whatsoever with music, with arts, right? So there's a lot for us to learn, not only through Spiritism, but many other teachings that we have received. And we see also this through the Old Testament, the New Testament, something that we have been inserted for many reincarnations already, and we still doubt. And we still suffer when we come in contact with death. But there's one more point that I would like to bring that is really pertinent to this discussion. The self-preservation instinct. It's necessary that we understand that we need to preserve ourselves. And this is something that comes with us because this is part of the natural laws that are inside of us. The law of preservation. And in questions 702, 703 of the Spirit's book, we will see that this is something that we carry with us. So I will try to stop anything that will try to aggressively take my life or hurt me. I will feel fear if I go right here, right at the ledge over here by the whatever you call, because it's too high, right? Some people don't even get near it, right? The fear of airplanes. It's not that we're doubting in a way what's in the airplane is gonna fall. It's just that in a way, a self-preservation mode that has taken to a different degree that the person yet or the spirit yet does not know how to limit or to utilize to its benefit, right? Or something has happened that now that fear has been established. So it's natural. Kardec then asks, is the self-preservation instinct a law of nature? Undoubtedly, said the spirits. All living beings possess it, regardless of their degree of intelligence. In some, it is purely mechanical. In others, it is rational. This rational ability, or the rationalization that we'll have about this instinct, comes with time. As we also saw in the book Heaven and Hell just a minute ago. Comes with this study. Okay, how do I limit this fear? I have to face it. It's not that I'm going to go and jump, become a daredevil or anything like that, but we have to face it. Sit down with someone who can help you, perhaps somebody who have studied in the field, whatever that is, the fear that you have, and then move on. Because that fear may stop you from suffering in certain areas, but also may stop you from evolving. It may create other problems that you will have to reincarnate to liberate yourself from that problem that could have been resolved in other situations. Okay? What was God's purpose in granting the instinct of self-preservation to all living beings? All beings must collaborate in the designs of providence. That is why God has given them the need to stay alive. Besides, life is necessary for the perfection of beings. They sense this instinctively without perceiving it. Interesting, isn't it? How can you sense something instinctively without perceiving it? It's possible. Especially on previous reincarnation. Now we're dealing more with the rational, right? We even rationalize the feelings. So, which is good. But instinct is something that we will never lose. And this is actually in the Genesis. We will never lose. We will change how we're connected, but we will never lose. But this is something for another study. But it's there. The self-preservation is there. And this is good. Otherwise, we would be doing things that, that wouldn't be appropriate for ourselves. As we see, unfortunately, some individuals doing so nowadays. And in many ways of life, and this could be from the daredevils of life to the person who carelessly, take care of their lives. So John the Evangelist comes and continues by saying, due to ignorance about life, death has been the cause of unimaginable suffering down through the millennia, triggering tragedies and endless woe. Every biological phenomenon that begins naturally ceases. Everything that is born on the physical plane is interrupted, transforms, and therefore dies. There is no time frame in telling absolute determinism. There can be innumerable reasons for the cycle to end. Hence, death is inevitable, and the suffering it generates results solely from the misinterpretation of life's objectives. Here's the question again. What is our objective of life? To get better, okay? To learn, okay? What else? These are questions that we should be asking ourselves daily. Because think about this. And I know this is a tough position to put ourselves in. When we are discarnating, what are we be thinking about? It's tough, isn't it? I said it was going to be tough, in a way funny because we're not thinking about it. But what are we thinking about it? I can tell you. I can go on and on and on. Seriously, I'll be thinking about the things that I didn't finish that day, the things that I didn't for the right now since I'm in school. And look how materialistic we are. Since I'm in school right now, and I'm putting myself on the spot, it's okay. The degree that I didn't finish early in life, right? The things that I didn't do for my kids yet, or the times that I missed with my family, and we go on and go on and on. If it is something with the physical body that I didn't take care of myself, I'm quite sure I'll be thinking I should have taken care of myself. If it is something that I did wrong, guess what? We'll be thinking about that problem over and over and over and over. Look how we're connecting. Most of the things that I said, we're connecting to the material. Am I materialistic? Yes, I am. Just like everybody else. That's why I'm here talking in the front, right? But number one, the reason I'm doing this exercise, self-exercise, because nobody helped, thank you, is because we are very connected with matter, right? We are materialistic. So we need to change. We need to start thinking bigger. When we talk about learning, we need to go back to the SMART Go and ask ourselves, learn what? It's okay for us to have made a program in the past and say, okay, I'm going to be a technician of some sort. But things didn't go that way, but it's okay. But now give yourself the opportunity to learn something. So what do I want to learn? I'm in this feud. I'm with this group of people. Here's my choice. I'm going to go ahead and pursue it. If it is something, I want to take care of my family, take care of your family. Make that your goal. Do it well, right? So we need to start thinking about this to have a goal in life so that when we go to the other side, at least you have the peace of mind to say, I tried to do this. That was my goal, right? We never know. We can have started and completed already, but it's never too late for us to start and have the peace of mind that in case we don't complete it as well, that the chance will be given to you to complete it while in the spiritual world or in the next life. We need to connect with this reality. In this sense, I would like to bring another piece here, and then we're going to dive into something really interesting that we find as well in spirituality and obviously religion. Attachment to the decaying transitory form produces emotional distress, fostering the idea that everything has been consumed and that nothing is left of what once was human existence. When all hopes are pinned on the body, the phenomena inherent to its constitution have a devastating impact on those who have identified it with. So I would like to resort to my pal Leo, or you can call it Ernesto. After I tell you the story a little bit, you will decide what name we should call this character. but it's from chapter 17 of this amazing book. I don't recommend to be read if you haven't read any spirits book before, but it's certainly something that you can read, after you get some introduction to Spiritism. And if it is hard, contact me, contact someone from the Spiritist Center. Those watching us from the web as well, it's important for us to seek help while you're reading this book, because it's intense. This book, actually, it's a compilation of cases that are helped in another spiritual colony called Mansão Paz. And we see cases here such as mitigated debt, expiring debt, collective expiations, and things that has happened to individuals before they went. Action and reaction. Sorry, Daniel. Thank you. You get so into it that you even forget to mention the name, but thank you. Before individuals discarnate and they are sent to Mansão Paz to receive help, they rehabilitate themselves through the help of the mentors there, and they do what? They reincarnate. The cases are related directly to what has happened in the past. So in this case, chapter 17, expiring debt. The case of Leo. André Luiz and Hilario, the other person who was actually with André Luiz, going through these cases, studying these cases in Mansão Paz, they come in contact with Leo. And he is in a hospital, actually in the physical body still, and he has tuberculosis. A very acute tuberculosis. Towards the end, he was really, when they went to see him, he was really in the last hours of being in the physical body. So they start studying his case, and they go through the situation, and the mentor tells them, you can speak with him. He will connect with you as if he was thinking with himself. He couldn't see André Luiz and Hilario, but he could connect with them. And they start carrying a conversation. His situation, to say the least, is that the lungs were consumed. We don't have to go to details because the book describes a little bit more in details, but it's interesting to put that out there, and we will see why. So they start talking to him in terms of, how do you feel in these last moments? And he's like, I'm okay. I understand what I'm going through. I'm going to be this. These are my last moments in the physical body. It's painful, but I understand. And you can imagine, for someone who has lungs that are completely consumed, to say such a thing, there's got to be something beyond that, right? There's got to be something that he had received some help in the past in order for him to be in that state of mind while dying, right? So they ask a couple questions. They go through some of the his current condition, and one of the things that he said was this right here, that he looks at the wall and he sees the image of Christ, and he says, there is nothing to be afraid of in the company of Christ, my Savior. He too was despised and forgotten. He tastes his own blood on the cross of martyrdom. He who was pierced by the wounds of ingratitude. Why shouldn't I resign myself to the cross of my bed and bear without complaint the gulps of blood that foretell my death from time to time? I, a sinner in need of divine indulgence. He was coughing up blood. That's how tough the situation was. And I'm not here trying to scare anybody, but to really illustrate what this help that we have received, the plan that we have done in the physical body, can do for ourselves. This situation, actually I sound better now. Wow. This situation, I got to make sure that my A1 to sound better. No, I'm just kidding. This situation came to this state over here because this individual reincarnated with a mental condition, if I can say that way, and he went through some troubled life. Okay, he had throughout the years been in a condition where he was left outside. He was put to be outside by his brother. Yes, by his brother. And for the longest time, he actually had to endure. He was kicked out of the house because his brother wanted to keep half of the inheritance that was given to him and his brother. And the brother just put him out of the house. He used to leave him out of the house, and for the longest time, he said, "No, now you have to go." Just to give you a little piece of the situation. In any case, he actually was Leo in this reincarnation. He asked to reincarnate this way. Why? Because as Ernesto, in the last reincarnation, he did the same thing to his brother. In the past, he had a brother, I believe the name, it was Fernando, and he had also a mental condition where he was capped from the rest of the family. He was rich, he had money, through an inheritance as well, but he was ashamed of having a brother like that, and he used to keep his brother also outside. Until one day he asked two slaves that he had to escape, so that it would look like that the slaves killed the brother and escaped. The slave escaped. Ernesto went and killed his brother. And you can see the reason why. He's now reincarnated as Leo going through this. And the mentor explains that it's not exactly the same death, but the knife that he put into his brother's chest in the past, it's pretty much the same thing that he's going through right now, coughing blood with the deterioration of the lungs. Because his mind was consumed while discarnating as Ernesto with the horrible thing that he had done with his brother, he was again induced to ask for this new reincarnation after obviously a rehabilitation, because there are spirits they don't rehabilitate that fast. And I know you're thinking, well, one reincarnation to rehabilitate, sometimes it takes more. So he asked to come in the same condition just to repair this situation. So we look at it and say, why some individuals, while in the deathbed or going through difficult situation in their lives, they're so resigned. They're so applied to that condition. It's not that they don't seek help. They do. But they don't cuss anybody out. They don't say negative things about life or about God, or they don't blame anybody else. But they have something within themselves that if I'm going through this, there must be a reason. They put their thoughts in prayer, just as he did over here. And look what the mentor actually says towards the end of this chapter. Whenever our pain doesn't cause new pain, and whenever our affliction doesn't cause affliction in those around us, our debt is in the process of expiring. Very often, the bed of pain is the blessed altar where we can extinguish ominous commitments and settle our accounts without harming anyone else. When patients yield to the heavenly designs in conformity and humility, they bear the sign of an expiring debt. And I would like to bring something that I heard Haroldo Dutra saying recently, is in terms, I believe the question was in terms of happiness, right? And he turns to the person who was asking the question, is that when we are executing our duties with happiness. Now, to be dutiful is to do the right thing, is to apply ourselves, is to understand life, right? And not complain and be happy about it. That's very hard. That's not easy. One thing is for us to follow the laws, yeah, but what is to be dutiful? Number one is to respect the freedom of others. That's a duty that we have, to exercise our freedom, but also to understand the freedom of others by knowing that my limitation is when I come in contact with the others. So that's very hard. And here we see this example of someone who's going through something that thank God, because of the forgiveness of the past, forgetfulness of the past. Forgetfulness, yes. Thank you. We go through, and he's not causing any harm to anybody else. He's not blaming anyone else. He's going through that difficult moment, yes. Because he's also asked about his family, and he mentions to André Luis, well, lost my mother, lost my father. My brother is the only one that I had, and he took everything away from me. He put me out on the streets. In the past life, it's also good to bring to this story as well, part of the story, that the brother that Ernesto had mistreated forgave him. He went on, forgave him. In this life, as Leo, he also forgives his brother. And I don't know what I just did. He also forgives his brother. So, one second. There it is. So it's interesting that we see the settlement of accounts. I like to bring this as well because, we always have to take in consideration of what happened to the other individual, right? Because the despair that I cause on Dion, for example, it's not only going to affect Dion directly, but it will also indirectly affect Aloysio, their daughter, their surrounding. And we're counting only the physical, what we can see. What about the spiritual friends? That we're much more connected with these individuals too. So we have to take all of this in consideration. Joanna de Angelis comes and says, in a way, this fact is the result of materialistic cultural education. Even under this spiritualist disguise, people join religious denominations without emotional bonding or a rational study of its content. Consequently, death appears as the great destroyer of plans, aspirations, and achievements. So why we're afraid of death? We're spiritists. Are we just reading? Are we just listening to the speaker? Or are we really connecting with the message and applying in our daily lives? Doing things in our lives as if we will be forever. I don't like to use the idea that today is my last day here on earth, because that's kind of strange, but to really think whatever I do is going to affect my future. It's going to affect what I will be in the next life. Because if I discarnate in a situation like Ernesto did, for any small thing, because sometimes we gave a great example, right? Something that horrible that a person or a spirit did. But what about the small things of life that really hurt someone? Or because their guilt is so acute, so strong, they carry that to the next life. And everything else that happens on top of that, it amounts onto it like a cancerous cell. It's the same thing. So we have to let go. We really have to open up to these ideas. I'll bring another example, because John de Angelis brings this idea of the religious arena, right? We see this in the Old Testament. We see this in philosophy. We see this in the New Testament, the different teachings of religions that we see. The parable of the rich fool. The parable is very materialistic, an explanation or exemplification of being materialistic, and calling our attention to say, we will be called to transition to the other side, and everything will be left here on earth. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Men who appointed me a judge or arbitrator between you?" Who appointed me? Then he said to them, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I will do. I will tear down my barn and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I will say to myself, 'You have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself?' This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God." And it was interesting to bring this parable because it connects with the example that we had of brothers having inheritance and having to share, right? As well as if we keep it to ourselves, we don't know when the next day will be. And then we have to come back and redo the whole thing. This is something that we find in Luke chapter 12, verses 13 to 21. And how have we been interpreting this message? This alone and many others. With an eye for the future, or a way to deprive ourselves from doing erroneous things, which is okay, right? Limiting ourselves, right? Or being defiant, or not being defiant. How are we using this? Because here we are. We can be called at any time. How can we be in connection with God, in connection with the transitory life that we learn so in many ways by not exercising this? So the teachings are there. In a way, this fact that's the part that we already read. By refusing to make a deep analysis of life, people go through their corporeal existence, putting such a reflection off for a later time. They plan and enjoy life to the utmost under the conniving illusion of carnal eternity. When young, they postpone the examination of death to old age. When healthy, they wait until infirmity strikes, believing themselves invulnerable to wear and the degenerative phenomena of matter. As time passes, they refuse to grow old, and they resort to surgery, physical fitness, and nutrition in the vain attempt to hang on to their youth, unavoidably ravaged by the years. There is a tenacious struggle to conceal reality, and when unsuccessful, neurotic crisis and escape through alcohol, drugs, or suicide may follow. This is us. This is what we are putting ourselves through without thinking. And again, we're not talking about, and this is, I know it's exhaustive, but we're not talking about the idea that we have to think about, today I'm going to die. No, have a plan for your day, but a plan that is eternal. Have a plan for next month. Have a plan for next year. Have a plan for this life. Start putting a plan for next reincarnation. Why not? Why not? Obviously, we have to attend to the designs of God, the things that we still have to attend. One parenthesis here of what was asked to the mentor when they were discussing the case of Leo and who was then Ernesto, was that did Leo expire all the debt that he had And the mentor says, well, I can't tell you all of the debts that he had throughout his different lifetimes. Obviously, he had more. He's not perfect yet. He wasn't perfect yet. But one thing that the mentor said, now this one, he's good. He's cleared. Now he can move on into new steps of life, learn new things, take care of new experiences, and expired debts that he had put on the side, right? Because if we had to bear all the debts that we have to bear in one lifetime, obviously it goes back to our goal. It goes back to have an effective goal and say, this is what I'm going to tackle. This is how much energy that I have to utilize to take care of this. Or this is too harsh for me right now. I can't deal with it. God give me the strength that perhaps in a while or whatever, I will have the ability to go ahead and take care of this. Towards the end, Joanna de Angelis also brings something really interesting that will connect with the gospel according to Spiritism by saying the death of good persons and the continued life of bad ones are often deplored as being an aberration in the sovereign laws when, in fact, all is as it should be. Because such good men and women were exemplary in their conduct and thought. They finished their commitments in the physical world and were able to return to their origin, whereas moral debtors, those of wrongful conduct, ought to be allowed more time for rehabilitation and rebalance. How many times we ask ourselves, and we'll see this soon, man, really? Such a good person, went back to the other side. Or when we see somebody who's doing something wrong, it could be this individual, right? And we have this addressed in the gospel according to Spiritism. But before, even when blessed with health, the body is a prison, and the liberation of a loved one who returns to plenitude should cause joy and not sorrow. When bad people discarnate, the same gladness should apply because death cuts short their life or transgression, perhaps giving them time to think without amassing more debt or ruining themselves even further. So we can see it different ways, right? If that individual is still in the body who is doing something wrong, guess what? It's a prison, right? It can serve as a prison for that individual. Or perhaps somebody who is discarnating that is not doing well, that's our mentor saying, enough is enough. You have done enough damage for others and for yourself. Because we think that the individuals that are being taken care of is only the loved ones, the good individuals. No, God takes care of everyone. And sometimes there are cases in this book as well, Action Reaction, that there were certain individuals that they were getting themselves into more debt, that they either their physical lives were cut short or their next life was very limited. In all sense, even the physical body was limited with all kinds of limitations. Otherwise, they would actually do more harm to themselves. So in the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 5, verse 22 by Fenelon, he says the following. The message is entitled, If He Had Been a Good Man, He Would Have Died. Look what he says. When speaking of a bad person who has escaped some peril, you often say, if he had been a good man, he would have died. Well then, in saying this, you state a truth, because it just so happens that God often gives to a spirit who is still budding on the paths of progress a longer trial than to a good spirit who, as a reward for its merit, will receive the grace of its trial being as short as possible. Consequently, whenever you use that axiom, have no doubt that you commit a blasphemy. We really have to be careful what we're saying because we're not God. Pray for that individual, whether that individual who was a good person, who is now passed, or somebody who's going a tough time, who is let's say causing a hard time on someone else's life and their life as well. Just the pain that we go through realizing that we did something wrong, when that happens, obviously, in itself is a harsh trial. The feeling of guilt, the realization that I did something wrong. And we heard this last week in our meetings, and it's available to everyone. The realization that I committed something wrong, that can consume us. And sometimes it's even hard for us to break free from that feeling and do something better about our lives because we're so drenched with the feeling of guilt. If a good man dies whose neighbor is a bad man, you rush to say, I be gone. So why would you want the bad person not to have time to finish, and the other remain in prison on terrestrial soil? What would you say about a prisoner who served his sentence but was kept in prison, while another who had no such a right was set free? Understand, therefore, that true freedom consists in deliverance from the bonds of the body, and that as long as you are on the earth, you are in captivity. Accustom yourselves not to criticize what you cannot understand, and believe that God is just in all things. Many times, what appears to be an evil is really a blessing, but your faculties are so limited that the great whole escapes your obtuse senses. Through thought, strive to leave your limited sphere, and to the measure that you ascend, the importance of the material life will diminish before your eyes, for it will show itself to you only as an incident in the infinite duration of your existence as a spirit, the only true existence. So here we have. I know it's a long text, but I thought that it was important for us to come in contact with it again. Bring this reality to ourselves again. Because we're not here just by chance. We chose to be here, sometimes for a certain purpose or others. But the bottom line is what? We'll all go through it. And if we can remember bits and pieces of this talk tonight, while we're going through, remember, I ask you to think about this as someone who will go through it or will be next to someone who will go through it, right? We'll go before some others, someone will go before us, and we have to give this hand. And we have to give this idea of the liberation of this machine. Through pain sometimes, it's a way for us to fix things of the past. Not with others, but with ourselves, right? And we need all the help that we can get. Death always causes mixed feelings in those who leave as well as in those who remain behind. In any case, it is normally a big surprise for everybody and usually very unpleasant. Excuse me. So, what can we do from now on? What are the steps that we want to take with our lives, right? In terms of life in the eternal. Because it's a transition, right? It's a test. Let's say that we chose to come together and to live this life, and we will take tests, the difficult moments, the good moments as well, right? The good things, because we're so materialistic and we live in this battles of between different states and different condition, and we connect with, because inevitably we have our own battles. Otherwise we wouldn't feel it, right? We connect with the negative because we have negative inside of us. So how do we liberate ourselves from the negative? How do we liberate ourselves from the idea that death is a bad thing? To finalize, Joanna de Angelis says, missing the deceased, grief, and concern about his or her situation in the afterlife are natural phenomena as a result of trials necessary for love, which must be sublimated due to the deceased physical absence and all its implications. Since true happiness cannot be experienced in the physical world, the day will come when one will experience it where there is no death, separation, or pain. Thus, one must live preparing to die and thinking about death so as not to suffer its afflictive injunction avoidant desperation, and its whole string of perturbing agents. Ouch, right? It hurts. Our physical body, being the physical body, connect with one another, the attraction that we cause on one another, thoughts, feelings, all these things. It's certainly not easy to deal with. At times, very trialing, right? Difficult. And we want to break free. We have our different ways to express breaking free, right? I was joking with my family. We were having a discussion, a group discussion, and I told them, you guys are lucky that we are not 5 minutes from the beach, because otherwise I would be in the water. That would be my way to liberate myself, right, from all the commotion. But they have their ways too. We have our different ways. The thing is, how do we connect with this reality and we take the good things with us? And I say liberation because a lot of people tend to think that liberation is to take our life short. Directly, as we have seen an increase of number of people committing suicide because of the struggles of life, as well as indirectly, resorting to alcohol, parties, different things. Work became a way to separate ourselves from the reality. Social media, right? Hiding ourselves from who we can be. All of these things. So we need to reatone ourselves. Where are we going? What's my goal? What can I do? How can I help others? Right? In all these things, in order for us to see life differently and understand that this is a transitory moment of eternal life. Eternal life. It would be nice if we could spread the word, you are eternal. You are eternal. Think about it. If we could tell our kids more that we are eternal. If we could tell inmates or friends that are going through harsh times that we are eternal. Perhaps our actions would be eternal as well. Because we would be thinking, okay, well, if I'm eternal and I do something that is going to affect my next life, I wouldn't do so. I would do something that will benefit me and benefit others. And we see also, again, examples of this. I believe is the book, The Messengers. Somebody reincarnating in the field where he sowed. Reaping the sowing that he planted in past lives. So we have this work to do. I hope that this wasn't boring and difficult to deal with, because when we're talking about death, when we're talking about this transition, as I said, I have lost some loved one this year, and it happens, right? When it really hits you, it's like, okay, maybe we need to recalibrate ourselves. And I think this also comes very really near a holiday that we have, that when we celebrate Halloween, dealing with the spooky things, right? The spiritual life, more in a funny way, but we are connecting somehow, right? So perhaps we need to take that to heart and help others. Obviously, we're not going to be talking to people, friends who are not a spiritist, and saying, think about death. But think about being eternal. Think about being kind, and hopefully this kindness will come back to you in the next life. So I'll give you a couple minutes for us to make some comments, some questions if you have. If I cannot answer, I'll take a note, and we'll discuss next time. But questions, comments that you may have. Ladies?
Hi, I really don't know how to deal with this, actually. Because if we think too much about death, be prepared to death, we don't live. In the stage that I am, that although I read some books, I know that there is a spiritual world, that we are immortal, all this. But this is not absorbed entirely on me. So I will have a disturbed life. I may be stuck. That's what I'm thinking. If I start to reflect too much in death, I will wait for some few occasions that I really have to go through, like, some loved ones or some really sickness, whatever. Because our brain, through these millions of lifetime as an animal before humans, we were born really to survive. This is life. So it's very difficult to not to work towards life today like this. So, and I was reading that we are actually biased, although we don't believe that, biased towards optimism rather than pessimism. Otherwise, you won't enter in some mortgage 30 years if you think tomorrow you may die. You won't have even kids if you think you may not be here to support them until whatever, college. So we are built up by this, what you said there, self-instinct for survival. So we have to be optimistic. We have to not to think about dying, that we're going to be alive, right? But I think we have to have a meaningful life. Meaningful life as much as possible, including the well-being of others. Because we hear that many people at the time they are dying, or even after they die and they come to the mediumistic meeting, what they regret most is not because the many buildings or big company that he had. No, it was a quality time with the loved ones. Why didn't I went to the soccer game with my kid? Why didn't I go there? Why didn't I connect that? Because they feel after they pass that, the family, what the family is praying or the family think about, it affects his condition as a discarnated being. So I think we have just to live a meaningful, loving life.
I'm just going to be... Okay, where's that thing? Hello? Hi. I just wanted to be your counterpoint. Isn't that good that we're friends? I actually, when I contemplate death, feel a joy, which you'll say that doesn't make sense. I mean, I have a physical body. I know I'm going to go through an attachment to this body. I'm not minimizing that I'm going to have some kind of death experience. But I really do believe all this. I really do believe that true joy is going to be there. And I will see loved ones. I can't wait to meet my guardian angel. I mean, that being has put in overtime over time. So I don't find it that difficult to think about death and be fully here.
It's three questions on the topic of death. I think I agree with all the comment and your presentation, but I wanted to put my thought on this too. It's not the right one. It's just for us to think about it, about what the problem is. Because there is a problem that we are afraid of something that is natural. So how we make an amendment with this situation that we all gonna go, no matter what, is redefine our understand about ourselves. Instead, think about death. Let's think about that we are immortal spirit. Being immortal, so we bring a different view of our life. Because everything we do, and also because of action reaction, we affect our future. So I think we need to continue this discussion. It's going to take time. I think Leo put beautifully something that take time for us to accept. And when comes the moment to change the paradigm, it's going to take time as well. So one thing that we cannot do is push other people to believe or to not be afraid, but bring something that will be redefine this feeling that we carry, because it's embedded in our biology. Okay, so I just wanted to put over there. Now, wrap it up.
Thank you, guys. I think that these are definitely good points, and we have to acknowledge what Jasko's point of view, as well as Paula's point of view, because when we come in contact with this, we have this divided way of seeing things. Sometimes we may see as Jasko does. Sometimes we may see as Paula does, and it happens. It happens with me sometimes. One of the things that I want to just to go back and truly point out, and they already mentioned some of the points that we brought here, but it's our conception or idea about death and life. I was at work the other day, and this mother had a little kid, and the kid was running around, obviously. And the mother was like, "Oh, don't go there. It's dark, and there is so-and-so there." So I'm like, okay, is it there? Somebody over there? So, I started thinking, it's putting that fear on the kid of something supernatural, whatever you want to describe it, that doesn't exist, right? So I'm just using this as an example of how we also teach ourselves, our kids, to deal with life. Look what I'm saying, to deal with life. Death is something obscure. Death is something that we connect with from ages. We connect with the devil, the dark places, right? So this is the connotation that we have been giving for millennia, right? Even before religion, right? The expressive religions as well, they do the same thing. They connect with the negative beings to put fear, impose fear, or to perhaps to guide people the right way, right? We see with Moses a very demanding God, right? And I'm giving this thing for us to realize why we think about death the way we think. Because we have been taught for millennia that death is something obscure. No wonder it's hard, Jasko, for us to see death, the decaying of the physical body, the loss of the physical body, as something natural. It's hard to see, as Paula does, that we are eternal. To feel the joy and to, as Daniel said, to acknowledge that it's something natural. It happens to all of us. To make amendments with that is hard, especially when, as Jasko said, and I'm repeating here, to really be at our core of our beings, when it's something that is inside of us, that if somebody throws anything at me right now, guess what? I'm going to try to dodge. I'm trying to save myself. If somebody pushes me, I'm going to try to regain balance. It's a natural thing. Unfortunately, not yet rationalized or modified to a higher level, right? This instinct of self-preservation. That's why sometimes we do some crazy things. And we avoid when we have to really engage. But it's something that we have to change over time. Only reincarnation, only reconnecting with ourselves, understanding ourselves, will take us to the right place. You have one comment too.
It's been my experience that the people who have been most religious usually have the most terror of death. And the people that are living, let's say, called the bourgeoisie lifestyle, they're the ones that suffer most because they're going to lose that. The people that really don't fear death are real criminals that have committed murder, then they know that they could be murdered any minute. Or people that have served in the military and have killed many people and they know what death is. They seem to have a lot lesser fear of death than the more religious people or the people that live the so-called are good people in the bourgeoisie lifestyle.
Good point. Yeah, one thing, real quick. It's important for us to acknowledge this as well, because these are all our perception about life and death, right? But it's unfortunate that we have allowed ourselves to take to the other extremes. And that's why we say misinterpretation of the natural laws, misinterpretation of what the self-preservation is, right? When somebody not only, they're not in the position where they're respecting it, but they completely, okay, whatever. You know, it's so mundane now to take the life of others that to me it doesn't really matter. I'll give an example, personal example. And I'm saying this because I'm giving you the ability to analyze my situation and apply to your lives. I deal with money. If I don't be careful, money becomes a piece of paper because I deal with a lot. And it becomes a second thing. It's just a piece of paper. But I have to understand that has a value, not for me because it's not my money, but for an institution that I work for. Right? Just because I deal with it a lot, that doesn't give me the right to go and abuse it. Number one, it's not mine. Number two, it belongs to someone else, and we have to give it account. Life, even though it was given to me, I have to give an account. Life of others, I also have to give an account if I do something wrong with it. To God and to myself. So I'm glad that you brought this point because it really alerts us in terms of how we give an account of our actions.
Yeah, just complementing exactly what you said about the actions. And I think I understand what Jasko was telling because it's not good to live with that idea that you are always afraid and you're not going to commit with a mortgage because you may die tomorrow, and many people think like that. And then I remember that book, Voltaire, I came back. And the guy was so strict. He was so disciplined. He was like, I'm going to have it all. But then when he got there, he had no light because he was, Voltaire. And then, remember, Voltaire? Yeah, I came back. So basically, I remember going to Rockville when we were in the beginning and we were having a discussion like that. And I never forgot a lady that said there was a joke about a drunk person. That he got there, but everybody liked him because he was a nice person. So despite of his problems, he didn't have a problem with death because he lived the life so well. He treated everybody good and kindly, and he didn't perturb anybody. He was alone, so when he could drink. Not that I'm encouraging people to drink. It's not the point. Now, the other guy was so strict and perturbed everybody's life with his rigidity. Yeah. And so what happened was that I think it's the balance all the time. The balance all the time. Then live life without, like I remember Givaldo saying, if you live life well, you're not going to be afraid of death. Because, you know what I mean? Now, if you are a pain.
Just to finalize, thank you, Dione, because that's important for us. Live well and live in balance. Have an uncle. Recently, I saw him when I was in Brazil the last time, and we were talking, when are you going to come and visit me in the United States? And he said, I don't know. I thought about this before, but, I'm afraid to schedule a trip for 6 months from now. I'm like, why is that? And he's like, what if I die? Well... And then my reaction was, well, you buy travel insurance. And he's like, what is that? Well, if you don't use the ticket, somebody else can use the ticket, or a family member will, be reimbursed of the money. He's like, me give my money to somebody else when I die? No, they don't need my money. I need my money now. So the discussion went on and on and on and on. But it was just something funny that, to make this a little bit more doable for all of us, we have to think in the future. We cannot let ourselves, cry over the difficulties of our lives and not do anything because we take our mortgages, right? We believe in the tomorrow. That alone is already a sign that we believe that we'll go on. If we don't live that way, if we don't think positive that way, this is what we're going to see in the next time. Suffering in the afterlife. We saw it a little bit with Leo today, right, in the afterlife. But we'll bring more examples, not to fear anyone, bring fear to anyone, but to truly allow ourselves to be more happy. This is coming to the last stretch of this book, and hopefully we'll connect with something amazing that we have been studying here with Kirsten, which is Jesus, the message that he brought, the living message that he brings to us, the eternal invitation of do well, be well for eternity, and everything will be given to us. So with no further ado, we'll go ahead and close it. I will invite everyone to follow me on in a visualization that we'll have tonight. I'll ask Danny to put some music.